Hello everyone, welcome to Dinesh QL. My name is Dinesh Priyankara, Data Platform MVP and Business Intelligence Architect. This is not something new, but thought to make a small video on this because I'm getting many questions on sending emails through Azure SQL database. You know that it is not available as a built-in service or built-in facility as a part of Azure SQL database. So you have to use some other Azure services for sending emails through Azure SQL database. So let's see how we can use all these services, integrate, and then send emails for responding certain activities of SQL Server operations. I'll quickly show you the things I have added to this video. So we'll be talking about the requirement, and then let's see how we can set up the environment using other services for sending emails through Azure SQL database. Since we are going to use two services, one is Azure SendGrid account and the one is Azure Logic Apps. Let's spend a couple of minutes on those two. Next is a demonstration, so I'll be creating a small database for testing all of these things, and then I'll show you the way of creating Azure SendGrid account, and then the way of using Logic Apps for sending emails, responding for a certain operation related to your Azure SQL database. So what is the requirement? We have been using standard SQL Server email services using SMTP for responding for certain business operations. For example, let's say we maintain a customer table. Whenever a new customer is inserted, we want to notify someone, or whenever someone changes the credit limit of the customer, we want to notify someone. So we basically send alerts or notification for DML operations. Not only that, sometimes for various reasons, it might be for auditing or tracking changes, we set notifications on DDL operations as well. If someone drops a table, we want to make sure that somebody is notified. If someone has modified a stored procedure, we want to make sure that someone is notified. So that's another scenario where we see the usage of sending emails. There's another one, we heavily use this one as well. Whenever someone logs into the system or the database management system, we want to notify someone. So we were able to handle all of these things with on-prem SQL Server or standard SQL Server because SMTP facility is there, and we can track all these changes using triggers, and then write some codes for sending emails if you have configured SMTP. Now let's see whether we can do the same with Azure SQL database. First thing, we know that SMTP support or the facility is not available with Azure SQL database. But in order to track these things, can we have triggers with Azure SQL database? Let's see the first one. Yes, we can have DML triggers just like the way we have been implementing with standard SQL Server. We can implement or we can add triggers for our operations. So that's possible. How about DDL operation? Do we have the support on that in Azure SQL database? Yes, Azure SQL database supports it, so we can track DDL operations. How about the third one? Can we track user login? So we use login triggers for tracking it, but unfortunately it is not available with Azure SQL database. Because of that, we have no way of tracking it in Azure SQL database. But let's focus on the first and second one, DDL operation and DML operation, and let's see how we can track these things using triggers and send emails. Now we know that we don't have SMTP facility in Azure SQL database. Because of that, we have to use SendGrid. But can we use SendGrid within Azure SQL database? No, it is not possible. That is where you see the usage of Logic App. So what you have to do is you need to configure Logic App to access SendGrid, and you need to make sure that Logic Apps responds for your DDL or DML operations. So once everything is configured, whenever something is happened, it can be either DDL or DML operation, Logic Apps will detect it and it will perform actions you have added. Or sending emails through SendGrid is one of the actions. You can add multiple actions, and all the actions you have added will be executed as a part of this execution. So that's how you have to send emails. So what is SendGrid account? So it is a cloud-based email service that can be used for sending emails. I'm sure that if you're a developer, you know it very well because most of the developers use SendGrid for configuring email facilities for their applications. Now it is a commercial product, so you have to pay. But the good thing with the Azure SendGrid account is you can send 25,000 emails per month without spending your money. So that's a good thing. So in most cases, we'll be notifying our database users based on certain operations, and we might not send more than 100 200, it depends on your business, but generally we are not going to spend 25,000 emails per month. So this is going to be a really good options. And if you really think that you'll be spending more than 25,000, yes, there are packages just like other Azure services. You can pick the best package for you and then configure your SendGrid account. And once this SendGrid account is configured, do not think that it has been configured for your Azure SQL database. It can be used with your other application. So what is Azure Logic Apps? It is a service that can be used for automating your business processes or scheduling your workflows. There are some other services in Azure which can be used for doing the same thing. For example, Azure Function is there. You can use Azure Function for automating certain operations. But let's stick into logic apps because we are not going to compare what is best for this. So when it comes to logic apps, you can simply design your environment without writing any codes. If you have used SQL Server integration services for configuring your ETL solution, you know that you can drag and drop and configure your flow for doing certain operation related to your data. So just like that, you can configure your logic app by configuring triggers and actions and complete your implementation. One thing you need to remember is you have to start with the trigger. Just to explain what is a trigger. Now, in order to get the logic app started, there must be a trigger configured. For example, let's take Azure SQL database table. You want to get this logic app executed whenever a record is inserted to that table. So that is going to be a trigger. So whenever you configure logic apps, you will see components. So for example, when you see SQL Server as a component within logic apps, when you take it, it will show you what are the supported triggers, what are the supported actions. And when it comes to SQL Server, you will see two types of triggers. Item is inserted, item is modified. So if you want to get this executed whenever a record is inserted to your table, you need to start with the first trigger or first trigger type, which is item is inserted. Once the trigger is implemented as a part of your logic apps, which is your first component in logic apps, then you can add more and more actions. For example, sending email through SendGrid is one of the actions. If you want to execute a query related to your database table, it is going to be one of the actions. Likewise, you can configure multiple actions using multiple services, multiple components available within logic apps. So that's how you do this implementation. Now let's go into the demo. So as I explained you with the first slide, this demo will show you the way of configuring SendGrid account and how to configure logic apps using SendGrid for sending emails responding certain operation related to sample database. Let's see the code. Okay, let's start with Azure SQL database. I have already created my Azure SQL database, which is email test DB. And let me explain what sort of things I'm going to do. So assume that we have a database and we maintain customers. So whenever a new customer is inserted, I want to make sure that someone is notified. So how do we do it? We know that Logic App supports this integration, but in order to make sure that the one we have implemented with Logic Apps, it is getting triggered by something related to SQL Server. So we are going to use item inserted trigger in Logic Apps. Now how do you do it? Whenever a new customer is inserted, what I'm going to do is I'm going to capture it through a trigger and capture details and insert a record to new customer notification. So this is the table that will be monitored by my Logic App. And whenever a new record is inserted to new customer notification, the implementation we have done with Logic Apps will be executed. So I want to make sure that Logic App has enough information to sending emails. So rather than passing individual values and then try to configure the email in Logic Apps, I'll be preparing the email body within SQL Server, and then I'll be having that value inside this new customer notification record. That's why you see this column as email body. So we'll be having customer table, we'll be having new customer notification table. Whenever a customer is inserted, a record is getting automatically added to new customer notification through a trigger, and this table has email body. So let me add one by one, and let me show you the code. So this is the code for creating the customer table. It has customer ID, name, and the credit limit. Let me execute and create the table. Right, table is created. Now I'm creating my other table, which is new customer notification. Remember, this is what we are going to use with logic caps. So the record will be automatically inserted to new customer notification through the trigger, which is set with customer table. So this has ID, date added, and we have set a default value, so you don't need to worry about inserting value for date added column. Email body, that's something we have to prepare as a part of the trigger code or trigger implementation, and that value has to be set with this. And then I want to make sure that this column is getting updated, is email sent is getting updated once the email is sent. So let's see how we can get that get this column updated as well. So let me create this table. Table is done. So this is the code for my trigger. So we start with the standard code, create trigger, the name of the trigger on this table, and it is after insert trigger. Right now, as you see, I have a variable declared called email body, and that's what I'm going to use for preparing the email body. This is what I'm going to do. My two variables, name and credit limit, will be filled using the inserted table. And as you see, I'm going to configure my email body with this code. So it is going to be a HTML code for the email body. So I'm going to start with HTML, and I'm going to end this with HTML. And certain information has been added, like new customer added, that's going to be the sort of title, and then another line called new customer is added, and the name of the customer is set with the variable coming from this, and credit limit is coming from this variable. So at the end of this code, this email body variable contain the content for the email. So once everything is ready, we can insert the record for new customer notification table. So all I have to do is just insert the value for email body, because ID does not, we don't need to insert the ID because it is an identity column, and date added we don't need because we have set the default value, and is email sent, again we have set the default value as false. So let me execute the trigger, or let me add the trigger. Done. Trigger is added to the customer table. Right. I'm going to do one more things, because once the email is sent, I want to make sure my is email sent column is updated. Okay, so the next code is the stored procedure, because we want to make sure that is email sent column is updated once the email is sent. So I have this stored procedure, which is called update new customer notification, and it accept new customer notification ID. So all we do within this stored procedure is updating is email sent related to this particular ID. So let me add this stored procedure. All done. Now the database is available. Next is Azure SendGrid account. So let's create Azure SendGrid account. If you have already added Azure SendGrid account as favorite, you'll be seeing it in your favorite list. In my case, I can see it. But if you have not added, all you have to do is click on all services and look for SendGrid. When you type send, you can see SendGrid account is available. So click on it, get the blade open. You can see I have already created one, but let me create a new one. Click on add. Select the subscription, select the resource group, and select the location. a name for your SendGrid account. So I'm going to name it as SQL SendGrid 3 because I have created one called 2, and let me set the password. Done. And you can see by default it has picked the free pricing tier, but if you click on change plan, you can see multiple packages. Based on your requirement, you can pick the one you want, but in our case free is totally enough. In addition to that, you need to enter some contact details. Let me quickly enter all of these. I entered every details required, so let me click on review and create. All looks good, and I'm going to click on create to get my Azure SendGrid account created. Okay, account is ready. Let me go into the account. Just like other Azure services, you can see multiple properties and multiple facilities with the left pane. Now, in order to use Azure SendGrid, first thing you need to make sure your account is getting you get the confirmation mail from SendGrid, and then you confirm your email address to completing the creation part. And then once it is done, you have to create API key for accessing SendGrid account for sending emails. Now we are going to use this SendGrid account within Logic Apps, so we need that API. So let's start with manage first. Let me click on manage. It will open another portal. So you get this message. Just click on send confirmation mail and check your inbox, and then click on the mail for confirming your email address. So once the email is confirmed, we have to generate the API key. So this is how you do it. You expand settings and you will see API keys. Click on it and then click on create API. You need to give a name. For example, let me say key for DB, and you can set the permission. I'm going to select full access and click on create and view. So you'll be seeing a key, and just remember you have to copy it immediately. All I have to do is just click here and then it will be copied, and then you have to keep it recorded somewhere, because you will not be able to get the key again if you have lost it. So let me click on done. I have copied the key. So that's all you have to do from SendGrid side. Now let's see how we can configure Logic Apps for handling everything. Okay, so the last step is creating the Logic Apps. So just like SendGrid, go for all services and look for Logic Apps. This is the one, and click on it. And you can see I have already added a one, but let me click on add for creating a new one. So resource group, I'm going to use my test resource group, and Logic App name is going to be SQL Logic Apps. Let me say it is 3. And I don't want to change the location, and so it is Southeast Asia. I don't want log analytics. That's all. So let me click on review and create. Everything looks okay, and I'm going to click on create button for completing the creation part. Okay, it's done, and let me go into my Logic Apps. So when you go into Logic Apps, this is what you are going to see. You can see so many templates for designing your flow or the process, but we are not going to use any available template. Let's start with the blank one. So let me click on blank Logic App, and as I told you, we need to start with the trigger. And in this case, trigger is something related to SQL Server. So let's look for SQL Server. I can see SQL Server. Let me click on it, and it has triggers and it has actions. You can see when item is created, that's for handling insert operation. When an item is modified, that's for handling updates. If I go for actions, I can see multiple actions like delete, row, execute. So these are the actions you can perform as a part of your Logic Apps. But we need to start with the trigger. So I'm going to select when an item is created trigger. Now you need connections. If you have already created connections for your previous logic apps, you'll be seeing it. You can see your connection. If you want, you can add new connection. If you have not added any connection, you will be prompted for creating connection. So all you have to do is just enter your server name, database name, and the credential. That's all. So I'm going to use my existing connection because I have already added a SQL Server connection. So let me select my SQL Server and the database. Once I have selected the server and the database, since credentials are available with this connection, it should show all the tables available. Now I can see customer table, I can see new customer notification. I don't want to get this logic app triggered based on the customer table. It has to be new customer notification. So let me select it. Now you can see it is not exactly some sort of synchronous execution. There would be some sort of delay, but you can decide it. So I'm going to say, I can actually accept the default value. So every 3 minutes this has to be checked. So that's what I'm going to configure. But if you expand the frequency, you can see even you can go up to second. But in my case, it's just sending an email whenever a new customer is available. So I don't want to check that one in every second. Even like every 30 minutes is fine. But in order to show you the way of sending emails, I'm going to set it as 3 minutes. Okay, so the first part is done. Now this part will be executed whenever a new record is inserted to new customer notification table. Now the next part is sending an email. So all we have to do is click on new step and create an action. Now this action has to be based on SendGrid. So look for SendGrid. So I can see SendGrid. Let me take it, and I can see multiple actions with SendGrid, and this is the action we have to select, send email. So let me select it. So let me enter from address. I set both my from and to as dineshpriyankar@gmail.com. This is just for testing. And subject, I'm going to say new customer added. Now email body, we don't need to type it here because we know that new customer table has a column called email body, and it has the required content. So all we have to do is click on this add dynamic content. You can see it has been automatically opened whenever you click on this, but if you want to close it, you can click on this, and if you want to get it opened again, you can click on it. Now how do I find the column? You can simply type the column name here. In my case, it is email body. When I type it, I can see. So everything coming from the first trigger will be available as dynamic content. So you have to pick the one. So let me click on email body. I can see it. You can see that it uses my first SendGrid account, not the one I have just created. So if I want to change it, I can click on change connection, and I can click on add new, enter the name, and it is SQL SendGrid 3, and paste the KPI key. Done. Let me click on create. Okay, now I can see that it uses my newly created SendGrid account. The required part is done, but we have to do one more thing because we need to make sure this table is getting updated once the email is sent. That's why we created the stored procedure. So how do we call the stored procedure? It is going to be another action. So let me click on new step for adding a new step for this flow, and it is per server. This time it is not a trigger, it is an action. So action is you can see multiple actions, but we have to pick execute stored procedure. Let me select it. Okay, so I can use the existing connection. So this is the existing connection. When I expand the drop down, I should see it. So this is my server name, and this is my database name. And once I have selected these two, it should display all the stored procedures available in this database. So I can see my stored procedure, which is update new customer notification. Let me select it. And if there are parameters on for this stored procedure, I should see them as well. I can see the parameter new customer notification ID. Click on it. Now you need to set a value for this. So we get the new customer notification ID from this trigger. That's why you are seeing it here. If you are not seeing it, all you have to do is just make a search. So everything that are loaded within this design, you can access them. But sometimes we need to keep them in variables. So logic app supports creating variables, holding values, and accessing these values through the variables later through another application. All these are possible, but in this case we don't need to use a variable. We can straight away access the value coming from the first part. So let me select this. Parameter value is set. That's all we have to set. Everything is ready. uh, Let me click on run and see whether this works. So this validates. It looks like everything is okay. Now let me close the designer. I can see the trigger for my logic caps, and I can click on this for seeing the trigger history. If I click on this, I can see multiple entries, but you can see the fired column is not filled, which means nothing has been entered yet. So let's go to the database and insert a new record and see whether it triggers this logic apps, and then logic apps sends an email through or using SendGrid. Let me close this. Let me go to my management studio. So I'm going to insert a new record to customer table. Done. So I can see a record in my customer table, and I should see a record in new customer notification table as well. Let me see. Yes, I can see, and you can see email body has been formed, and the value of is email sent is false. Now, my logic app should detect this, and then it should send an email to my email box saying that new customer is added, and after that logic app should update this column. So let's see. Let me open my email inbox. I can see a new record, so let me click on that and let me open that email. So this is what we were expecting. So I can see the one we have formed as an HTML. I can see it, new customer added, this is the name, this is the credit limit. So it works whenever we insert a record to customer table. Customer table trigger is getting fired, and it inserts a record to new customer notification table, and my logic apps is keep on monitoring my new customer notification table. It has a record, so it starts all the actions we have added in the logic apps. The first action is sending an email. It has sent, and the second action is updating the is email sent column. So let's see whether column has been updated or not. I can see one for this, so both actions have been executed without an issue. So this is how you handle emails with Azure SQL database. That's all for this video. So I hope you understood the way of sending emails for Azure SQL database operations. And if you have any questions, you can put a comment. I'll respond whenever the time permits. Thanks for watching.